In today's video, I'm going to discuss the similarities and differences between the conventional deadlift and the hex bar deadlift and provide a brief explanation for how to correctly execute each of them. First, I'll start with the conventional deadlift since it is the most common. To perform a conventional deadlift, first step up to the bar. While looking down, you should be able to cut your feet in half with the bar, so it'll be about mid-foot. Depending on your foot size, this will place your shins about 2 to 4 inches from the bar, and your feet should be solidly placed facing forward at shoulder width, give or take an inch or two. Now, it's okay for your toes to point outward slightly, but typically athletes try to keep their feet facing forward. Begin the lift by flexing the knees, ankles, and hips to lower your hands to the bar. It is important to be sure that your torso is upright throughout the movement. Once you have a solid grip on the bar, be sure to pull the slack out before you attempt the lift. You can do this by beginning to pull the bar without picking it up. This is done just to make sure that you are not forcibly jerking the weight off the ground, which can result in injury. Once the slack is pulled out, begin to extend the knees, ankles, and hips. During this phase, you will notice that the ankles extend the least while the knees and hips have a greater degree of extension. The knees will extend slightly faster than the hips to allow you to keep the bar against your body. This is essentially dragging the bar up the shins and the quads to keep the weight as close to your center of gravity as possible. At the top of the lift, flex the hips, then the knees to allow the weight to lower while keeping the bar against your body. The conventional deadlift is great for overall strength, but really focuses on the erectors, lats, traps, and flexor muscles of the forearms and glutes to some extent. The conventional deadlift results in much more trunk lean compared to counterparts, which in turn will put more emphasis on the posterior muscles. This also results in less activation of the quads. It's important to keep in mind that the bar displacement is greater in the conventional, meaning that the lifter will be moving the bar vertically a little bit further than they would on the hex bar deadlift. Another point to keep in mind is that the conventional deadlift results in some more compression of the 4th and 5th lumbar vertebra than the hex bar, and that's just something to keep in mind in case you have recently suffered a lumbar injury and would like to prevent any more damage to that area or stress on it. Next, I'll discuss the hex bar deadlift. Unfortunately, a lot of gyms or fitness facilities don't have access to the hex bar, but if you do, they are a great alternative to a straight bar, and I'll discuss why in just a second. To set up, first step inside the bar and place your feet about the same distance you would for a conventional deadlift, which would be about shoulder width. Do your best to stand in the middle of the bar. You can do this by lining up the grips with either side of your hips. Again, just like the conventional dead, you will flex your ankles, knees, and hips to bring your hands down to the grips, which stick up from the bar by about 3 to 4 inches. Grip the handles, pull out the slack, do not jerk the weight off the ground. Extend the ankles, knees, and hips to pull the bar until you hit lockout, but do not shift the hips forward at the top of the lift. I know it's easy to do since you don't have a bar against your quads, but do your best to avoid the posterior pelvic tilt. After lockout, lower the weight by flexing the ankles, knees, and hips. Now, remember when I said that the grips were extended a few inches from the frame of the bar, meaning that when you start the lift, you will be a slightly higher position, allowing you to remain more upright than you would for a conventional deadlift. This puts slightly more emphasis on the quads and less on the erectors and lumbar vertebra. Utilizing the hex bar also reduces the horizontal displacement of the weight because the weight is distributed at your sides rather than in front, and again, the weight is closer to your joints. The moment arm of this lift is significantly reduced compared to its conventional counterpart, which is just a fancy way of saying that it's typically easier to lift heavier loads than a deadlift with a straight bar. Now, who should perform what lift and why? If you are a competitive powerlifter, the answer is always conventional, simply because it's one of the 3 main lifts that they test. If you want to perform well, then you must train that specific lift and train it often. For strongman competitors, it gets a little muddy. Some competitions will utilize a straight bar, and some may require their competitors to perform a deadlift variation with the grips at the sides. In this case, it would be beneficial to train both and focus on one if you know you have a competition coming up that will require that particular lift. For general hypertrophy and strength, I still believe overall that a conventional straight bar deadlift is king. It's the one movement that any able-bodied athlete or competitor should have in their yearly program for at least a few mesocycles. I will note that the deadlift can accumulate a large amount of fatigue very quickly, and hypertrophic stimulus will fall off as training weeks go by. so it's not something I can recommend keeping in year round. For athletes, either is a great choice, but hex bar may be more beneficial due to lower lumbar stress, which can help prevent or avoid injuries. It also gets the athlete closer to a good athletic position, which is utilized in a lot of other lifts. If you have a history of lumbar injuries or are looking to add a deadlift into your rehabilitation program, the hex bar is a much safer alternative to utilize. And that was straight bar deadlift versus hex bar. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and let me know what you thought. I will have more how-tos and comparison videos in the weeks to come. So if you have any requests or questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments down below. Hopefully this deadlift video helped you out a little bit. If you're interested in something like the snatch grip deadlift, you can check out my first video which focused on that.